If you're starting your own channel on YouTube, let's talk about my top 10 tips for small creators. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. First off, the 3 T's. Before you've even started your script or hit record, all of the big creators will tell you that you need to start with the 3 T's. That is your topic, your thumbnail, and your title. And a lot of them will tell you that your thumbnail and your title are almost as important as the topic itself. You can think of this as being, for example, like an ad. It is designed to be persuasive. It's like an ad and the copy that is on the ad as well. If you don't have the right packaging for your thumbnail, then you could have the best idea in the world when it comes to your first YouTube video or your first videos on your channel, but it's not going to make a difference if people aren't actually clicking on your YouTube video. And that is why the thumbnail and the title are so important when you are coming up with what topics to share on your YouTube channel. You want to think about what is going to compel people to click, or what is going to feel like the right video at the right time. And this leads nicely into tip number 2, which is that timing is everything. Sometimes the old cliche related to this is very accurate, because you might have the best idea for your videos on your YouTube channel, but if they're not being delivered at the time where people are receptive to that idea, then your really great video or your really great topic that you are covering might be completely overlooked. It's just not landing at the time that people are most craving that particular topic. So you really want to put yourself in the mindset of your audience. What is it that they are looking for during that particular time of the year? Really get into their frame of mind. What do they need and when do they need it most? And something that can help you to understand this better is to use Google Trends. So to use the website Google Trends and to search the popularity of topics at particular times, because this will show you the peaks and troughs when it comes to certain topics. So you can put your idea into Google Trends, and if you use the date range filters and the YouTube filters, this will tell you the popularity of that topic in terms of searches on YouTube, and this will help you to understand when it is that your audience is craving the topics that you might be considering for your YouTube videos. But where do you start when it comes to the topics that you might be considering? My tip number 3 is to think in problems. Remember that YouTube is a search engine. It is actually the second biggest website in the entire world, and it comes only second to Google, who actually also own YouTube. So remind yourself that YouTube isn't just an entertainment platform, it is a search engine. And whether you are looking to be educated, to be entertained, to be inspired, all of that relates back to someone wanting to solve a problem that they have. They want to be entertained. They want to find the answer to a question. They want to get more information on a topic that they are interested in. So whether you are covering something like how to write a better resume or Christmas decorating ideas, the concept is still the same. You are trying to solve a problem that your audience has. So again, get into the mind frame of the problems that your audience might have. And the best way that I feel that you can do this is to just actually think about what they are typing into YouTube. So what is their actual query into YouTube? This is one of the easiest ways to start to think about the strategy for your search engine optimization. And one of the ways that you can very easily do that without getting into a super complicated SEO strategy is to open up a incognito or a private window that doesn't have all of your current search data or any of your own sort of profiling related to your past searches, open up a new private window and type into YouTube the idea that you are exploring, but don't completely finish these queries. So, for example, because I cover a lot of personal branding on this channel, what I might type into YouTube is personal branding and see how those queries are automatically being completed. So, what are the suggestions that YouTube is providing before I have finished typing that? Because this will give you a clue as to what it is that people are searching for. So, you can decide if that is a topic that you might like to cover because you know the intent, the search intent is already there. My tip number 4 is to understand the art of thumbnails. Now, I know I mentioned this as a part of the 3 T's, but it is really important to understand this in more detail or to understand the importance of this in general. And it's easy to see thumbnails as being like a typical ad, as being like curated branding, or as being like thumbnails that you would have on other platforms. But when it comes to YouTube, it's really unique that it sits in this sweet spot of all of those things. And sometimes I see, for example, brands like local businesses that have done well on a platform like Instagram, for example, move into YouTube and just include, for example, a really curated, really branded cover image from their podcast, and they might use the same image for every single video, or they might have variations of that same generic brand image for every video. And what I have generally found is that that tends to not work so well when it comes to YouTube. YouTube is this art. There is so much clutter on the homepage of our YouTube pages that it really needs to cut through. It needs to get people's attention in all of the other things that they could be clicking on. And the little choices that you make when it comes to your thumbnail make a big difference. And you do need to give these things thought. For example, what is the font that you are using? What is the size of the fonts that you are using? Is this readable? And is it readable at different scales? So, for example, this might look great when you're looking at it on your laptop, but what you want to do, and what I do with all of my thumbnails when I'm designing them in Canva, is that I scale them down. So I flip to the thumbnail view that shows a lot of images all together. So I can see that when this is really small, the text is still going to be visible, and I can check its readability at that scale. Because remember that a lot of people are going to be scrolling YouTube, probably the majority are going to be scrolling YouTube on their mobiles as opposed to their big beautiful screen. So you want to keep this in mind when you are designing your thumbnail. What I also like to consider is font hierarchy as well. So obviously the words that you include on your thumbnail are going to be really important, and you need to be usually really succinct in this space. But what I like to do when there is the opportunity is to create a hierarchy between the different words. So for example, if it's more important that the priority is that the viewers see particular words, then I like to make sure that I am differentiating the way that I present these words as opposed to others. So this comes back to general guidelines in typography. So what is the priority of where you want the eyes of your viewer to go? What is it that you want them to see first? What is it that you want them to see next? What I also like to think about as well is the contrast of your font choices. So for example, how is this sitting on the image that you have chosen? Is it going to be a choice that pops the most compared to other options? So again, this comes back to some basic graphic design rules. You want to make sure that you're creating the most contrast possible, because this is going to improve your cut through for when people are actually reading that, and it's going to improve your readability as well. What you also want to think about is the exclusion zones when it comes to where you are placing your font. So again, it might look a certain way on your screen, but you want to keep in mind that this appears differently on YouTube. For example, you will have a little timestamp in the right-hand corner of your videos that you ideally want to make sure that you are avoiding, so that any key text isn't actually being covered up by that too. With your thumbnail, you can also consider the general branding that you are creating for yourself. So while I said that it's not about having a perfectly curated, polished brand, it is about having ideally some level of consistency, because as you start to build your audience, you want to make sure that your content becomes recognizable in their feed. So what are the elements of your content that they can see as being consistent without them having to think too much about this? So if you, for example, think about how you can pretty easily notice a Coca-Cola red or a Tiffany & Co. blue, think about this when it comes to your own brand. What is it that you want them to be able to recognize? And this doesn't need to just relate to your font choices. This can relate to a few different things. So it might be the way that you style your thumbnail. It might be a really consistent sort of setup that you have with your thumbnail. I, for example, am always wearing black in my videos. I generally have the same setup because of where I film my videos, and I generally follow just a few different styles of fonts. And so I keep it really consistent, hoping that for my audience, they'll be able to recognize my videos when it is in their feed. And when they click onto my page as well, it doesn't feel so chaotic with so many different inconsistent ideas. This is where you need to think like a brand and come up with some sort of consistency as to how you are packaging your personal brand. Something else that is worth keeping in mind as well is that SEO now doesn't just apply to your title. Your search engine optimization is relevant to your thumbnail as well, because AI and all of the technology behind platforms like YouTube is just getting smarter and smarter. So it is going to be able to read and understand your thumbnail. And this is probably only going to improve with time as well. And I personally think that when it comes to small creators, it's important to leverage every opportunity that you have for search engine optimization compared to bigger creators who may not need to worry about that as much. My tip number 5 is to build your second brain. Now, if you follow this channel, you would know that I absolutely love Tiago Forte's book, Building a Second Brain. And one of the things that really stood out to me in this book is that your best ideas won't come to you when you need them the most. And I think that this is so true for starting a YouTube channel. I think we like to think that we'll sit down at our perfectly polished spreadsheets and all of our most brilliant YouTube ideas are going to come to us. But I have found that your YouTube ideas will come to you when you are doing other things. They'll come to you when you're exercising, when you're going about your day, when you're in the shower, when you're cooking, when you're watching other YouTube videos, when you're reading a book. I'm someone who loves a spreadsheet, but I personally find that when it comes to my YouTube ideas, I find it a lot more helpful to just keep a simple list in the notes app of my phone for all of my YouTube ideas. And then when it comes to actually creating a new idea, I can just review that list and see what feels most relevant. My tip number 6 is to fight for your first 5 seconds. This was an idea that really resonated with me when I read Stephen Bartlett's book, The Diary of a CEO. And if you follow his channel, you would know that it is an absolute masterclass in really making the most of this concept. His hooks for his videos are really impressive, and he obviously puts this idea into practice. The key when it comes to YouTube is understanding what metrics are most important. And one of the key metrics is the retention in your videos. And this can also be one of the most difficult because your retention can drop within the first 5 seconds. It can drop almost immediately. And what Bartlett highlights in his book is that your audience is going to decide whether or not you meet all of the filters in their head as to if they think that you are wallpaper or not. They will make those decisions really quickly. And so while you might feel like you can be a little bit more chatty through the rest of your video, I think when you are first starting, it is really important to understand the importance of the hook that you have for your video. So if you're not big on scripts when it comes to your video, this is one place where you might like to consider actually having your hook written down, or at least paying attention to what you are saying in your hook or the way that you are delivering your hook more so than the rest of your video, because this is the most important element of your video. It will decide if people click away or if they keep watching. My tip number 7 is the 1% rule. Aim to get 1% better with every video that you create. This was advice that really stood out to me from mega creator Ali Abdaal, and I think that it is just such a simple strategy, which is what I love about this. It takes all of the pressure off from having to feel like all of your first videos need to be perfect. Instead, it really gets you into this mindset that you are going to grow and develop over time, and it is those tiny changes that is going to get you to where you want to eventually be, and to not put all of that pressure on yourself to do all of those things at once. So for example, these tiny changes might be in the way that you are presenting. It might be in the way that you are speaking. It could be as simple as your editing style, maybe trying a new element, or even as tiny as trying what it feels like, which I remember Ali Abdaal saying, to add like a prop to your video and just experimenting with that, because even things like that can make a difference and eventually get you to the place that you want to be. My tip number 8 is to think in playlists. So we've already talked about the value of retention, but repeat viewing will take this one step further. For example, if someone has watched one of your videos, you want to be able to create a snowball effect for them. You want them to keep watching other videos. So for example, if they watch one of your videos and then they are served another on their homepage, you want to make that a topic that is going to resonate with them. Or if they've watched one of your videos and they click onto your page to see what other topics you cover, you want to make sure that you have videos that are aligned to that. So this is why I like the idea of thinking in playlists, because instead of having isolated ideas, it gets you to group concepts together. So you've probably heard people talk about having content pillars as a part of your channel. So you might have, for example, 4 content pillars as a part of your channel, which might lend itself nicely to the playlists that you develop as a part of your channel. But you are encouraging binging, which I've heard someone from YouTube describe as one of the best ways to grow your channel. So the way that you can think about this is, for example, if you have a topic idea, ask yourself if that idea can actually be broken down into multiple concepts. Instead of just being one big concept, how does it become multiple ideas? Or you might have one big idea, but how does that extend into other videos as well? If you don't think about all of this up front, you might also find later on that you can do this as a reactive approach. So you might find that you have a particular topic that performs well on your YouTube channel. So that gives you a clue as to what your audience is craving. So you might then take that topic. So for example, if I have covered something about rebranding yourself or rebranding your personal brand, and I notice that this has done well, I might break this down into rebranding yourself part 2. I might break this down into rebranding your visual brand or rebranding your verbal brand, so that that idea goes into more detail, because you already know that your audience is interested in that topic, meaning that they might be interested in taking a deep dive into it as well. And as opposed to watching one video, the more time that someone spends on your channel, the more that they are going to build their connection with you, and the more likely they are to watch your future video videos or to subscribe. My tip number 9 is to close with an intentional call to action. Now, I know it's easy when you see a lot of other YouTubers remind you to like, subscribe, to comment, to hit the notification button. But when you are a small channel, you haven't yet earned that trust or that level of attention from your audience to be able to mention all of these different things to them and expect them to be that engaged, to take action in all of those areas or in one of those areas. So, what I find is more useful for a smaller channel is to focus on the one thing that you want your audience to do. So, what is your one call to action? And this is probably just the basics of marketing anyway. It's what's the primary call to action? What's the one thing that you want someone to do? What I have personally found is that while you're trying to earn trust with your audience, that immediately asking them to subscribe might be more of a challenge. You might not have built that relationship yet. So, what I like to do as a preference or a priority over asking people to subscribe is to recommend what the next video is that they could watch. So, if you ask them to watch the next video or you're specific about the video that most relates to the topic that you have just covered, then you're more likely going to earn their trust, I feel, or at least earn some of their willingness to look at that next topic that you are sharing, as opposed to just asking them to subscribe straight away. I do ask people to subscribe in some of my videos, but my priority is always to see if there is a video that is most relevant to the topic that they have just watched. And my tip number 10 is to assess your results using Pareto's law. Pareto's law, if you haven't heard of it, is the idea that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your efforts. Now, I know that it's really easy when you start a YouTube channel to get really into all of the really complicated analytics that you have available in your YouTube analytics, and to almost be overwhelmed by analysis paralysis when it comes to what to do next or what to do with all of the information that you have. And what I have found is most useful is to focus on the 20% of videos, once you have more data for your channel, that have generated the best results for you. So one of the simplest ways to do this is going to be considering the videos that have had the most views on your channel. What are the 20% of videos that have had the highest views? When you assess those videos in detail, what clues are they giving you? And then what I think is also useful as well, just to make this really easy, is to look at the subscriber engagement that you had as a part of those videos, because you might have had a video that performs really well, but if the subscriber rate is really low, or the number of subscribers that she had as a part of that video is really low, or if the engagement for that video is really low, then it might tell you that although it was a video that a lot of people wanted to click on, maybe it didn't actually deliver what it was that you were trying to achieve, or it didn't meet the expectations of your audience. So the idea might be something that you could explore, but perhaps the way that you executed it could be improved to elevate the experience that your audience had. If you want to go into even more detail, then check out my previous episode on 50 tiny tips for YouTube beginners. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.